So here's a wild thought. What if the very thing that made you a political superstar, your tough talk, your shocking statements, what if all of that became the evidence used to put you on trial? Well, that's not a hypothetical. It's the incredible, true story of Rodrigo Duterte. It's a pretty staggering turnaround, right? Not too long ago, Rodrigo Duterte was the president of the Philippines, wielding immense power. Today, he's facing the real possibility of being a detainee at The Hague. This explainer is all about how that happened, how the man behind a brutal war on drugs ended up in the crosshairs of international justice. And you gotta understand, this is a huge deal. We're talking about a historic first. Duterte is the very first former head of state from anywhere in Asia to face these specific charges, crimes against humanity, at the ICC. So the big question is, how on earth did a leader so popular with his own people get here? To really get what's going on, we have to rewind the clock. We need to look at the whole strong man persona he carefully built over decades. You see, this story doesn't actually start at the presidential palace. It starts way back in a place called Davos City, and that's where he perfected the methods that would later define his presidency. Just look at this timeline. He spends decades as the mayor of Davao. Then bam, 2016, he gets elected president and almost immediately kicks off his signature nationwide campaign. And now, less than 10 years later, he's in custody. It really shows you how he took what he was doing on a local level and just scaled it up for the entire country, with deadly results. So, what exactly was his method? Well, in Davao, he got this reputation for being incredibly tough on crime, but prosecutors say it was all built on a foundation of pure brutality. They accuse him of supporting the notorious Davao Death Squad, the DDS. I mean, the ICC charge sheet gets super specific, alleging that he personally initiated hitmen, christening them with wine, handing them guns, and promising them protection and cash for killings. And when he became president, he just brought his crew from Davao up to the national level to keep the system going. And here's the thing, none of this was a secret. He wasn't whispering this stuff in back rooms. This quote right here, it's from a campaign rally in 2015. He was openly, publicly promising to take the killings from 1,000 in Davao to 100,000 nationwide. And for a lot of people, that wasn't a warning. It was exactly what they wanted to hear. And this is where the story takes a fascinating turn. It's the central irony of this whole case. Back home, all that tough talk, all that violent rhetoric, that was his political brand. It made him popular. But inside the formal, quiet halls of the International Criminal Court, those exact same words are being read as something very, very different. A confession. I mean, seriously, does it get any more direct than this? In a speech in 2018, he said it himself. My sin is extrajudicial killings. For a prosecutor, that's not just a politician talking. That's a golden ticket. It's a direct admission of guilt from the man at the very top, and it's become a cornerstone of their entire case against him. Legally speaking, this all comes down to one simple concept: self-incrimination. All of Duterte's speeches, his off-the-cuff remarks at rallies, his TV interviews, they've all been transformed from political bravado into a massive catalog of evidence. Okay, so let's break down exactly how this works. You take that campaign promise, that 1,000 will become 100,000. For the prosecution, that's not just talk. That shows a clear intent to create a lethal national policy. Then you have him boasting about going around looking for a confrontation so I could kill. Well, to them, that establishes his personal involvement and his responsibility as the commander-in-chief. His own words basically drew them a map. And believe me, that wasn't just some one-time slip of the tongue. Here he is again, this time in a 2016 BBC interview, admitting to an international audience that he personally killed people when he was mayor. He says it plain as day. I was really looking for a confrontation so I could kill. Of course, you can probably guess what happened every time he said something like this. His staff and his supporters would rush out and try to do damage control. They'd say, "Oh, he's just being playful," or "You can't take him literally," or "That's just the president's style." And, that might fly in the world of politics, but it's a much, much harder sell in a court of law. Okay, so with all that said, let's get into the nitty-gritty. How does all of this, the death squads, the public statements, how does it all add up to a formal indictment at The Hague? What exactly is he being charged with? The prosecution is using a really specific legal angle here. They're calling him an indirect co-perpetrator. What does that mean? Basically, they're not trying to prove that Duterte pulled the trigger in all of these killings himself.
Instead, they're arguing that he was the architect. He designed, encouraged, and ordered a murderous policy, and that makes him criminally responsible for the actions of the entire group, the police, the hitmen, everyone involved.
So, the whole case boils down to these three main counts of crimes against humanity. The first one takes us back to his time as mayor in Davao, but the next two cover his time as president, focusing on the targeted killings of so-called high-value targets and also these broader, brutal clearance operations that happened in villages all over the country. When you add it all up, across those three counts, the ICC's case specifically names 78 victims. 78 people who were murdered. 78 families. That's the specific official number the court is focused on for this trial. But, and you really have to let this sink in, that number, 78, is just the tip of a massive, tragic iceberg. Human rights organizations, even using conservative estimates, say the real death toll from his war on drugs is over 12,000 people. Some sources say it could be tens of thousands more. The scale of the killing was just immense. Which brings us right back to today. Because this legal battle at The Hague isn't happening in a vacuum. At the very same time, there's a huge, furious political battle raging back in the Philippines. So how is his legal team handling this? Well, Duterte is 80 years old, and their main defense strategy right now is to claim he's suffering from cognitive impairment and isn't mentally fit to even stand trial. For now, the court has hit pause on the case to get him evaluated, so the whole process is kind of in limbo. Meanwhile, the political scene back home is just wild. His supporters are screaming that this is all a political hit job orchestrated by the current president, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. And then there's this, which is just unbelievable. This past May, while in custody at The Hague, Rodrigo Duterte was re-elected as the mayor of Davao City. His son is now the acting mayor. It just goes to show you how much power and support he still has. But the prosecution's argument is basically, let's cut through all the political noise. They say this isn't about one political family versus another. This is about one thing, accountability. It's about a systematic policy of murder that a head of state didn't just approve of, but one he openly bragged about time and time again. And that really leaves us with one big question to chew on. When a leader's own words, his own bravado, become the key evidence against him, what's really on trial here? Is it just the man, Rodrigo Duterte? Or is it something bigger? Is it the entire brutal method of governance he created? A method built on fear, violence, and his own unfiltered voice.